Trauma is rooted in our exposure to deeply distressing or disturbing events. Traumatic events include actual or threatened death or serious injury to oneself or another person. But any situation that overwhelms a person's ability to cope can result in trauma, even if it doesn't involve physical harm. While there are no objective criteria to determine which events will cause trauma, there are some common themes in traumatic events, including loss of control, helplessness, pain, confusion, betrayal, abuse of power, and loss. It is important to note that what we experience as traumatic can be greatly influenced not just by the event itself or the themes therein, but also by our response. The same event can be extremely traumatic for one person and much less so for another. It is not solely the objective facts or circumstances that determine whether an event is traumatic, but your subjective or personal emotional and physical experience of the event. The more intensely you feel fear, horror, or helplessness as a result of an event, the more likely you are to experience symptoms of trauma in your thinking, emotions, and body. According to the National Council for Behavioral Health, 70% of adults in the US have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. Trauma can stem from one-time events or from ongoing, relentless adverse experiences. Experiences that may be traumatic include physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, childhood abuse and neglect, accidents and natural disasters, witnessing acts of violence, medical interventions, grief and loss, cultural, intergenerational, and historical trauma such as racism, discrimination, and oppression, and violence in the community, war, or terrorism. Some events that can cause traumatic stress are disregarded because they don't necessarily threaten one's life or physical safety. For instance, life changes, like a new job or moving, relationship events like divorce, infidelity, or an upsetting personal conflict, life stressors like financial troubles, work stress or conflict, or legal battles. The cumulative effects of these unresolved adverse experiences can be debilitating and long-lasting. Coping with trauma of a natural or man-made disaster that you weren't directly involved with can be similarly challenging. For example, viewing horrific images of terrorist attacks over and over again on social media and news sources can lead to overwhelm and create an ongoing state of traumatic stress. Compassion fatigue is another type of stress that helping professionals such as healthcare workers, educators, mental health professionals, and spiritual leaders should be particularly aware of. Compassion fatigue is stress that accumulates as a result of exposure and attempts to help and support individuals struggling with trauma, such as students, patients, and community members. Over time, the helpers begin to experience their own symptoms of trauma that may not be so different than the exact symptoms they were trying to relieve for others. Compassion fatigue takes a toll, not only on those suffering from it, but also on the workplace, causing decreased productivity, more sick days, and higher turnover. While traumatic events can happen to anyone, you're more likely to be traumatized by an event if you're already under a heavy stress load, have recently suffered a series of losses, or have been traumatized before, especially if the earlier trauma occurred in childhood. Trauma can lead to changes in our emotions, thoughts, and physical body. Emotional responses to trauma can vary greatly, and traumatic stress tends to evoke two emotional extremes. Feeling either too much emotion, like being overwhelmed, where we might experience outbursts or break down crying, or feeling too little emotion, where we might be numb and disinterested. Some emotional symptoms in trauma include shock, denial or disbelief, confusion and difficulty concentrating, anger, irritability, mood swings, anxiety and fear, guilt, shame, and self-blame, withdrawing from others, feeling sad or hopeless, and feeling disconnected or numb. How an individual thinks about themselves and their worth others and whether or not they are trustworthy or helpful, and the world in terms of if it is safe or has anything to offer can all shift in the wake of trauma. Trauma can also affect one's beliefs about the future and result in a loss of hope. It can limit our positive expectations about life or foster fear that life will end abruptly or early. Difficult thoughts, images, sounds, and smells related to the traumatic event may push into our minds and feel hard to control or manage. One can also have physical responses to trauma, and they include insomnia or nightmares, fatigue, being startled easily, racing heartbeat and sweating, aches and pain, nausea, and muscle tension. It is a normal response for people to continue to have these signs for some days or even weeks following the trauma. But cumulatively, the effects of traumatic stress can negatively impact physical health. For example, there is a direct correlation between trauma and health conditions such as diabetes, COPD, heart disease, cancer, and high blood pressure. Also, trauma is a risk factor for nearly every behavioral health disorder. So while emotional, mental, and physical reactions are common and typically fade over time, monitoring and staying attuned to our reactions is important in helping us to avoid more significant issues down the line. Healing from trauma takes time, and the pace of recovery is different for everyone. So it is important not to judge your own reactions against anyone else's. Instead, monitor your experience and remind yourself that seeking outside support can only help decrease the impact of trauma on you, those around you, and your long-term health. Here are some strategies you can use to cope with trauma and symptoms of traumatic stress. Take care of your physical health. It might seem obvious, but when stress hits, we tend to neglect our bodies. Over time, this can lead us to be out of sync with our physical health and less attuned to what our bodies need. Having a healthy body can increase your ability to cope with the stress of trauma. Each time we engage in a healthy habit, we practice staying attuned to our bodies so that we can continue to be aware of our health needs in the future, rather than getting used to tuning signals from our body out by trying to ignore or avoid them. Following a traumatic event, try to maintain a balance with enough sleep, exercise, water, and diet. Avoid alcohol and drugs. Their use can worsen your trauma symptoms, increase your feelings of depression, anxiety, and isolation, and drive you further out of touch with what your body and mind really need to recover. Engage in activities that are relaxing, like stretching, yoga, getting a massage, deep breathing, walking, or soaking in a warm bath. Take care of your mental health. Following a traumatic event, you may try to repress your feelings or focus only on negative thoughts, or stop doing the things that you used to enjoy, all of which will exacerbate or worsen traumatic stress. Acknowledge your feelings about the trauma as they arise and do your best to accept them as part of you. Focus on being present and incorporate mindfulness practice into everyday routines, even if it's just for a few minutes. Engage in activities that you enjoy, things that make you smile, like listening to music or watching funny videos, or activities that might help you process your feelings, like writing in a journal. Stick with these activities even if they aren't feeling exactly as they used to. It may take some time to get back into a rhythm, and these activities are likely to feel different because you are in a different state, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and that's okay. Reduce your exposure to sources of ongoing stress. For example, by taking a break from social media and the news to help reduce your overall stress level. Connect with others. Following a traumatic event, you might feel like withdrawing from others or isolating yourself, but that can make things worse. Instead, reach out to your support system. Talking to a trusted friend, family member, counselor, colleague, or mental health professional, and getting support and understanding at a difficult time can be very helpful. Joining a support group for trauma survivors and connecting with people who are facing some challenges that are similar can help you to feel less alone. And hearing about how they are coping might help inspire you in your own recovery. Another form of connecting that can be helpful is helping others. Volunteering can be a great way to challenge the sense of helplessness that often accompanies trauma. Remind yourself of your strengths and reclaim your sense of power by helping others. It can also be as simple as stepping up for your partner or lending a hand to a neighbor in need. Most people who go through traumatic events experience short-term symptoms, but with time, good self-care, and a support system, they usually get better. In some cases, experiencing a traumatic event can cause post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. Symptoms of PTSD may include flashbacks, nightmares and severe anxiety, as well as uncontrollable thoughts about the event. If you have disturbing thoughts and feelings about a traumatic event for more than a month, if they're severe, or if you feel like you're having trouble getting your life back under control, talk to your doctor or a mental health professional. Please know that if you are struggling to think about or speak to your own traumatic experience and consistently feel overwhelmed when you attempt to bring it up, it is best to seek out a professional who can help you to learn the skills to better manage your thoughts and feelings before diving into the details of your experience in a way that doesn't feel safe for you. Getting treatment as soon as possible can help prevent PTSD symptoms from getting worse. If you have serious concerns about your safety, seek help immediately. People can and do recover from trauma. Reaching out to your support system, using healthy strategies to cope with stress, building your resilience, and seeking professional help if you need to are all ways that you can get on the road to recovery.